Breaking news, Seahawk fans. The Seattle Seahawks have a new offensive coordinator, and he is Brian Fleury. This is why you subscribe to the channel, though. The minute that there is breaking news, we get it out to you. As soon as I found out what was going on, I made sure that I got a short out. Now we're going into a little bit of a deeper dive here on the VOD. So make sure that you subscribe to the channel. We're going to have you covered on any type of breaking news for the Seattle Seahawks in the 2026 off season. Now, I think I'm a bit surprised of what decision the Seahawks made in this hiring. Not because I don't think that Brian Fleury is a good coach. In fact, I think he is a very good coach, and we're going to dive into that greatly on today's video. But I do think it is important to kind of note that the Seahawks made it sound like they were going to stay with an internal candidate. The Seahawks were doing a great job of making sure that their internal candidates got a lot of opportunities for this position. So to me, that tells me that Brian Fleury came in and absolutely knocked the socks off of the interview process. He came in and he made sure that Mike Macdonald really understood what type of an offense that he was going to run and that it was going to fit with what the Seahawks were already doing. Now, as soon as the news came out that Fleury was going to be the offensive coordinator in Seattle, there was some breaking news with some internal candidates, specifically one in particular that I kind of expected if he wasn't going to be the OC in Seattle. I did expect him to move on, and we'll dive into that in a moment. But I really want to make sure that we're breaking down what type of coach Brian Fleury is going to be. So remember, head coach Mike Macdonald made it very clear that he wants to have an offensive system and an offensive style that is called the Seahawk style, right? He wanted to create a type of offense and a type of style of running the football with a mirror of the play action pass that everyone kind of came to know as the Seahawks version of it, similar to how you have Sean McVay's version of the McVay offense, similar to how in college football you have the air raid, aka the Mike Leach type of offense. And Brian Fleury really fits into this offensive style and system. Remember, Klint Kubiak comes from the Kyle Shanahan tree, just like Brian Fleury is going to do. So he is basically creating or building upon the offense that Kubiak brought in that was built upon the offense that Kyle Shanahan had, right? So it makes sense here that Seattle would want to work with someone who is already knows what this system is going to be or what a version of this system is going to be. Now you're going to be able to, as the Seahawks players, you're going to be able to continue to build off of a lot of the similar skill sets that you already had to build upon in Kubiak's system, right? It took this offense a little bit to get going, especially running the football wise, to have a lot of the players, especially on the offensive line, really understand what this scheme was going to look like and how they needed to perform in this scheme. So to me, when I look at this offense and when I look at what the Seahawks are trying to build and create, it only makes sense to build upon what was already there. So when I look at a guy like Brian Fleury, I understand that he has created a very sound run game, and he was the run game coordinator with the San Francisco 49ers. And say what you will about that offense last year, they had a lot of success despite a lot of injuries, so that makes me feel pretty darn good. They also were able to run the football at a very highly effective level against every team not named the Seattle Seahawks. So if they're running the football pretty darn well, and you have a guy that comes from that Kyle Shanahan tree, the lingo is going to be the same. You're going to be able to call plays and create a run scheme that really works, and the players don't have to change. That's what's most important. They're able to come in and just go, hey, this play means the same thing in the Kubiak system as it does in the Brian Fleury system, so we can continue to build upon the successes that were already kind of figured out and created at the end of last season. Right? So I do like this, bringing in Brian Fleury and understanding that he is going to help push this crew forward. What I also like about Brian Fleury is the success that he's had with tight ends. I think that A.J. Barner is a solid pros pro, and I believe that Elijah Arroyo can turn into one of the best, if not the best, tight ends in the National Football League. Well, guess what? Who's been coaching one of the best tight ends in the National Football League for the past 4 years? Since 2022, Brian freaking Fleury, right? So in 2022, 23, 24, and in 25, Brian Fleury was coaching George Kittle. And he had some of the best years of his career while Brian Fleury was his coach. So now you're going to have an offensive coordinator that can really get the most out of these tight ends, which I do believe were the unsung heroes in this Seahawks offense. AJ Barner is a fantastic blocker, and he's done a great job of creating a lane for himself where he is a solid pros pro when it comes to being a tight end, and he's a legit red zone target. When you look at a guy like Elijah Arroyo, he has a skill set to be special because he's essentially a wide receiver playing tight end. Now, his blocking does need to improve slightly, but when it comes to the type of stress that he puts on offenses, I think that Brian Fleury can make sure he maximizes and gets the most out of Elijah Arroyo, which is huge because Arroyo is trying to grow into being one of the big-time performers in the National Football League at tight end, and I think that he can get there. So Seattle did a great job of taking someone that already fits the system, and so you're not having to learn anything new, but you're also adding in a coach that is going to help build upon the successes that were already there by the players in the position group that he coached at his previous stop. What I do think is important to mention, and I briefly touched on it, but I want to dive into it more, I was a bit surprised that Seattle went with an external candidate. Mike Macdonald made it very clear that he wanted to give the internal candidates as much of an opportunity to get this job as possible. If you've been watching the channel, you know that I was kind of assuming that it was going to be Jake Peetz who got this job, or potentially Andrew Janocko. There was also a lot of people who were saying that Justin Otten had a very good shot at getting that job as well. So for Seattle to go and grab someone that already was out of the system or was not already with this team does make me believe that there were some assurances that these guys, for the most part, would stay. Now, it is important to mention that as soon as the news broke that Flurry was going to be the offensive coordinator in Seattle, it was announced that Andrew Janocko was going to leave and he was going to be the OC in Las Vegas. That shouldn't shock anybody, and that doesn't shock me. I expected him to leave if he was not the OC. He was going to be an offensive coordinator somewhere, Janocko, that is. He's been a Klint Kubiak guy for years. He came to Seattle because of Kubiak. And so to me, this makes a ton of sense. Now, what's going to be most important for the Seattle Seahawks is, can they retain this coaching staff? Can they retain a Jake Peetz? Can they retain Otten? Can they retain Benton, the offensive line coach? Can they retain a lot of this offensive staff? Because if they can, I think that you're just hitting the ground running and you are just continuing to build on all of the successes that the Seahawks had. They were the best team in the National Football League for a GD reason, and they can continue to build upon that. What is important, though, to mention with this Seahawks team is that I do believe that they are going to be able to get big-name free agents now because they are holding on to the system that they have created. They are showing that this team is going to be here for the long haul. I also wonder, and this is kind of as we're going through, this is breaking news for me as well. Sorry to the family reunion that I had to step out of. That's why I'm not in the humble abode right now. I will say that this is very important to mention, and that this is something that is very important for people to kind of think about, right? If you're bringing in Brian Fleury, you better have an understanding that this is someone that's going to be able to kind of knock the socks off of a guy like Kenneth Walker. Because Seattle needs to find a way to retain him and keep him on this squad. He is a free agent, and because of how well he played the last 2 months of the year, Kenneth Walker earned himself a lot of money. And so if Kenneth Walker is going to not like the hire of a Brian Fleury, well, then that does worry me. So I do believe that there are some assurances that not only does Kenneth Walker want to return to Seattle, he's been very clear about that, but there's also some assurances in my mind that if Brian Fleury is going to be the guy that comes in, well, he's going to make sure that he designs and shows Kenneth Walker the system that he's going to run is going to accentuate the skill set that Walker has. So when I look at this team and I look at this crew, I do think that this eventually is going to be viewed as a really smart hire, if it's not viewed as it already. It's the Seahawks continuing to build upon the successes that they've already had. But more importantly, it's the Seahawks basically showing everyone that they're going to give their guys an opportunity to come in and get a job. And if they do not knock their socks off, they're going to go with the next best guy. This is still the Shanahan, Kubiak, now Flurry tree. And there are a lot of defensive coaches like Zach Orr who've shown that they trust Mike Macdonald and John Schneider in the system that they're creating, because Orr could have been a defensive coordinator, and instead he's coming to be a position coach for the Seattle Seahawks. So if you're going to go in and you're Mike Macdonald and you're John Schneider and you're going to hire Brian Fleury, I feel pretty darn good about that hire. When you're looking at the amount of misses that these two have had together, they're pretty dang hard to find. They're pretty dang hard to find. I want you to go right now in the comment section and you're going to do two things for me. You're going to let me know what your grade is for the Brian Fleury offensive coordinator hire. Are you going to give this an A, B, C, D, or F? Let me know down below in the comment section. I'm telling you right now, because it's Mike Macdonald, because it's John Schneider, because of the hot streak that those two have been on, this is a B plus, A minus hire to me. It just is. I think I originally was expecting it to be an internal candidate, and if it's Jake Peetz, I'm instantly going A, of course, because that's the guy that I had put my money behind. But if you're telling me you're bringing in a guy like Brian Fleury, there's been no misses for the most part with Mike Macdonald and John Schneider when it comes to their offensive staff. Even your miss is Ryan Grubb. He got you to 10 wins. So that's pretty dang impressive. The other thing that I want you to do after I gave it a B, you're going to let me know what your grade is on the hire. High B plus. Make that clear. High B plus. What your one-word reaction was to Fleury getting the job. I'll tell you right now, I was surprised. I was surprised. But the more that I looked into it, the more that I researched, the more that I read up on Fleury, the more I realized that I really do like this hire. The more that I realized how good of a coach he can be and how much he can do for this Seahawks team. I'm pretty dang excited because the grass is pretty darn green in Seattle, and I cannot wait. I cannot wait to see what Fleury does for this crew. Thank you guys so much for viewing today's video. Like I said, make sure you come in and you smash that subscribe button. We're going to have you covered on any of the breaking news for the Seattle Seahawks in the 2026 NFL offseason. Thank you guys so much for viewing today's video, and I cannot wait to see you guys next time.